It's not that I don't want to see you. I just decided I'd rather feel you. Where was I when I was reading this yesterday? How deeply touched I was by it, with just that experience of, it's so hard to put this into words, but this level, this degree, the enormity of truth and the wisdom and the love that's here. It just takes I'd say your breath away. That would be good, but it actually just goes beyond mind. That's how I was feeling. However many times I've read it, of course we all change and we all just go deeper. And then there's that experience of the truth of the beauty of the readings. Davy was saying last week, she wanted to say last week, this is the best reading. But now I would argue with her, this is the best reading. But of course I've said that so many times before. And then just being with people who are so deeply attuned to the truth in it. So many of the lines in the chant, which of course I won't be able to pull them all up, but they speak to all of what Jesus was telling us with this parable. So with that line, touch me but once and I will change. And you just feel how, first of all, that's the truth. Ramana Maharshi was once having a discussion. Master, who's Paramahansa Yogananda, had approached him. I don't know when this was. It must have been when he went back to India. And he called him one of the very great saints of all times. And he asked him a couple of questions, but one of them was about suffering. And he said to Ramana Maharshi, why do people have to suffer? Which is, of course, a huge part of this parable, which is that this son who became prodigal went away and was squandered all of the wealth that the father had given him. Half of the father's wealth was given over. He left. He went out into what Jesus called foreign lands. And he suffered, and he suffered, and he suffered, and then eventually he came home. I'm interrupting myself so many times. I'm hoping I'm going to be able to get back to all these stories. I think I will. This is exactly what the festival is about. The Festival of Light that we read every single week. That is so important that Swami Kriyananda wrote something for us and then said, this came to me. He said this was an inspiration, the festival. This is what we'll do every week after the talk is given. So one wonders, I think about it every week when I listen, what truth and depth and lesson there must be in there for us, that we can keep going deeper and deeper and deeper with it, hopefully every week as we grow spiritually, because Swami Kriyananda wanted us to. He didn't want us to just sit here and waste 20 or 30 minutes of our time. He was saying, listen, this is the story of a soul's descent into the world of the senses and the path that it needs to take, its resistance, its struggle, its suffering to find its way back to its home in God. It came to him in a story about a little bird, and Swamiji himself said he stopped and he said, a little bird? What does the bird have to do with anything? But it's how it came, and it was an inspiration. It's exactly the story of the prodigal son. No surprise, again, because it's truth. But part of what happens is this soul really suffers. He suffers in all of the ways until there's a famine, and he is literally famished, which of course means he's just literally dying to know God. Dying for God's love is what it means. And he comes home to his father, who of course represents all of our fathers. But there's so much suffering. And Master said to Ramana Maharshi, why do we have to suffer? Or what does suffering mean in this world? And Ramana Maharshi answered Yogananda. He said, suffering is the way to the realization of God's love. It is the way, he said. There is no other way. And it's interesting because that, for us, it goes against everything that's in us. We naturally want to feel suffering as a crisis, as a calamity. How often do we stop right at that moment of suffering, whatever that is, and see that as a God-given opportunity for freedom, which is precisely what it is. And it's precisely what both Yogananda and Ramana Maharshi and Jesus are telling us. Suffering is along the way. It's up to us, of course, to decide how many times do we have to suffer in the same way over and over. And in our festival, and some of you know it, and if you're new, you'll hear it at the end of this service, but it says we keep going on and on, making these same mistakes, when even repeatedly we lose everything we have. Even repeatedly, we don't get what it is we think we want, and the suffering can be so great. I have but there's one little line that I left out before I tell you a story. This line that says, touch me but once and I will change. And it goes on, it's perfect. All the sense lamps that I did light suited into worry. Means they were just reduced to ashes. Everything I thought I wanted in the world, all the sense lamps that I did light suited into worry. Light thy resurrecting lamp, which means it's an allusion, of course, to the chakras, but it's asking God to bring his light in and allow us to be resurrected into our true selves. It just couldn't have been more perfect. We know, and this is something else, as I was just reading about this reading and finding things that Master said, and he quoted his talk with Ramana Maharshi. Ramana Maharshi says, even the thought that you want to come home, as soon as this son knew that he would come back to his father's place, he had no idea what he was coming back to. He was coming back as a beggar. I don't deserve anything, he said to his father. I've been awful. Just give me any little job so that I can be fed even a little. I don't deserve all of your love. But as soon as the father sees the son, before the son even has a chance to throw himself in a beggarly way at the father's feet, what does the father do? He says, bring a robe, bring a ring, put sandals on his feet, bring him food, feed him. In other words, as soon as we decide that we want to know God, he can touch us once and we change, and we see the possibility of what happened to this son, of becoming a saint, from being prodigal, wasteful, extravagant. In a moment, turn our direction, our attention towards God. Ramana Maharshi said, the instant you even think of God, if you take one step towards him, these are his words, his love is greater than a mother's, and he will take 9 steps towards you. Such is his love. That is so beautiful. God wants us to feel his love. He wants us to feel embraced, cared for, given to, all of that. And it's ours. It's already there. But what does this mean to be prodigal? I have a client that I'd like to share a story about her. She is not part of Ananda. You don't know her. So no matter how much the story sounds like somebody, this is sort of like historical fiction. None of these are real facts for anybody we know. But some time ago, an acquaintance came up and asked me if I was still accepting new clients. And I said, no, absolutely not. I mean, I'm just doing something else right now with my life. I should say God's doing something else with this life, is what it feels like. But she said again, she said, I think this is really meaningful. I'm not sure that I could think of anybody else who could help this woman. And somehow I felt like that was the truth. I never feel that, or I don't often feel that. There's always people who can help. We help people, but other people could do it as well. Somehow this felt right, so I met this woman who I've now been seeing for quite some time. She was a mess, an absolute mess in her life. She has had a whole life of very serious abuse, one level of abuse after another, leading up to many years ago now, over 15, she developed a very weird medical condition. It has a name, it's not important. You get an injury, a little injury, tiny, fall, twist your ankle, something like that, and it sets off a cascade of neurological events that lead to severe, unrelenting chronic pain. It's a very, very difficult thing to live with. It's neurologic, so it's nerve pain. She got the form that spreads throughout your whole body. It's just a story that's, one could hardly believe it. You couldn't make it up. She cried, she wept, just wept every time I saw her. Somehow, what I felt about her was great joy when I was in her presence. I just felt the essence of who she really is. She looked beautiful to me. She has a great sense of humor. She actually loves to laugh in those rare moments where it can get in. And I sort of fell in love with this woman, not fall in love, but I felt or moved into a loving space with her. And I just knew that she could get better. I just knew that she could. But this woman suffered. I mean, it was exactly this story. And one day after we were leaving our session, and she had been crying and crying, weeping, just like a flood of tears, which she always did. And sort of, why me? Why did this happen to me? Why did I have to be abused? Why did I get this condition? Why don't I have a partner? Why can't I travel? I hate the scooter I have to use. This is what she went on. And I just kept saying to her, I just think you're so fabulous. As soon as you see it, you'll be well. Now, I didn't tell her she would heal, but I told her she could be well. And then a few weeks ago, she sent me an article that another teacher, a teacher, I should say, who she has done workshops with and retreats with had written. And it was about healing, and it said that the very instant that you decide to be well, in that very instant, you begin to reprogram that which has been hardwired into your brain. Now, we know this to be true, actually. He was not talking about God at all, but he was saying to her, to everybody, this was just an article, that if you believe that, the shock to the brain, to the genome, to all the smallest aspects of what makes us who we are or who we think we are. This is exactly what Swami Kriyananda would call our bundle of self-definitions. All of the ways we hold ourselves. She holds herself as being sick and underprivileged and abused and all of that. And here came this article from somebody that she respected that said, everybody can do this. Everybody. But it takes that real belief. And then you're writing your future in the moment. You're writing a new, in an instant, a total change in your character and in your body, and it spreads throughout your entire being, and you will be well. And she sent it to me and said, would you read this before we get together? Which of course I did. And when we got together, this is now, after a long time, just a few weeks ago, I was watching her and I said to myself, she is a prodigal daughter. She is a prodigal daughter. Prodigal son doesn't just mean spending money, hoping that the world, that obtaining physical possessions, or all the things we say it so often, the right partner, the right school, the right job, the right anything outside of ourselves, which of course the prodigal son did. He took money and he squandered it. And he allowed his soul, which is of course the essence of the divine. What that father was dividing was not really money. He was dividing the essence of who he is, just like he does with all of us. That's who we are. And this son took all of that, which is divine, and he squandered it, to say the least, but he denied his divine essence, his own divine essence, which the Father had just given him. And I realized, I hadn't read this, I had no idea that this reading was even coming up, but I said to myself, this is what prodigal means. It means all of the ways, every way, that we live with self-definitions, that we deny the magnificent essence of who we are, and we get sick and we suffer. Not a bad thing when we turn that suffering around. We say, I don't want to do this anymore. I am done suffering. I need, this article said this teacher has gone back with his students and they could tell him the instant in their life where they decided to be well. It's very powerful when you think of it. And I said to her, this is what he's telling you. You can do this. And she would just cry, but how, I've tried everything. And I say to her, no, you haven't. You've tried everything out here. That's what we do. But the soul is completely lost. This is the foreign land. This is not about a soul reality. This is your ego's reality. How long will you suffer? Maybe you'll live with this pain. Maybe you'll have that scooter the rest of your life. Start making reservations for a trip right now. right now, travel. I said to her, look, the whole world just opened up to you. Begin to move energy, whatever it is. And suddenly, in that moment, she saw it. And we spent the session making plans for a trip. Now, it's not important. She wanted to go wherever she wanted to go. But energy moving, we take one step, God takes 9. Everything about that soul changed in a moment. She got it between his words and this story. It's like, we don't have to stay with anything. We don't have to keep suffering. That's what yoga is. That's what Shankya is. That's our whole path. We come to that moment, we say, enough. I'm done working with the swine. I'm going home. And in that instant, whatever the situation is in our lives, everything changes. And God's grace, which has so much more magnetism to it, and his love than all of where we've been wallowing, finally can come. And in a moment, we can be transformed into a saint. That's what the Father did here. That's our story. That woman has one of those hardest stories I've ever heard. Now, might she slip and slide a little? Of course, we all do. But I watched her get it. Not because her pain was gone, not because she could travel without the scooter, not because a partner appeared. Energy moved. She believed. She had that moment of seeing truth, of feeling. She doesn't like to use the word God, so I don't. She felt so loved. She had no idea where it was coming from. And those tears suddenly went from those tears of self-pity, anguish. Those tears became tears of divine joy. Touch me but once, and I will change. All those sense lamps, where's that gotten us? Nowhere. Light thy resurrecting light. Come inside. That's what this saying. The kingdom of God is within us. It is now, it always has been, it always will be. And God's just waiting for us. And he wants us to come home. This is, I can't see what time it is. I'm sorry. I could be keeping you here till 1 o'clock, excuse me. Sorry. Just dawned on me. Oh, it's time. You know, this story is so beautiful. This morning I was thinking, this is a course. This parable is a course. That's how a course means over time, or a 4-hour Saturday. There's so much truth in it. So much, and it's told so simply. We are so loved. It's like, sweetie, you don't need to be out there. Come home. And if we come home, you know, what happens? It's like I forget the name of this parable. I'm sorry, it just came to me, but of no, this is the prodigal son, but there's one that precedes it in the Bible where the shepherd has 100 sheep and 99 of them are there, but he loses one. And he just goes, I have to go out and find those sheep. And he just leaves the 99 who are already there. And he's so happy. He comes home, I found my sheep. I found my sheep. That's us. Any one of us. That's what God loves. He loves, of course he loves everybody who's already with him. But every lesson we learn, every time we just embrace the divine, we open to that love, which is instantaneously healing. The lamps get lit, and then we are drawing that energy, which looks like money in this story, but it's not. It's the essence of the divine, and we are living, all of us still, to some degree, out there. And this parable says just what Yogananda and Swamiji, everybody says to us, This is God's energy. Treat it perfectly. We always say, treat it like God is right with you. See each other like they are God. They are. He is. Draw that energy in and up. And in that moment, this is what Master says. The spiritual path is difficult at first, and then it becomes effortlessly liberating. Effortlessly liberating. We sit here and we'd love to be effortlessly liberated, but we forget that suffering is the way to self-realization. We have to work hard. We have to get strong to overcome all of the delusion, and then we begin to find our way home. And as soon as God knows that, we get a robe, a ring, sandals, a meal, all meaning we get to feel God's love. God bless
you. Walk like a man, even though you walk alone. Why court approval once the road is known? Let come who will, but if they all turn home, the goal still awaits you. Go on alone. Follow your dreams, though it lead to worlds unknown. Life's but a shadow once our dreams have flown. What if men cry, your dream is not your own? Your soul knows the answer. Go on alone. Give life your heart, bless everything that's grown. Fear not the loving, all this world's your own. Make rich the soil, but once the seed is sown, seek freedom, don't linger. Go on alone. Walk like a man, even though you walk alone. Why court approval once the road is known? Let come who will, but if they all turn home, the goal still awaits you. Go